of how many cases they've gone over, et cetera. So it actually may coincide to be a good discussion. And so with that, we're finished with our legislation, but we have Mr. Fields here. If he wants to come up and take the seat, he's got a presentation for us. The clerk will help you.
If you don't mind, I'll stand here.
Yeah, that's fine. Just be sure you identify both of you for the record, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm Kevin Fields. I'm President and CEO of Louisville Central Community Center. And I first want to thank our Councilwoman Barbara Sexton Smith for inviting us to come and share with this committee some of the work that we're advancing in our neighborhood of Russell. I am here accompanied with Sean Somerville, who is a project coordinator on staff with us at LCCC for the Ali Boulevard Arts and Culture District, and our colleague Scott Love with Metro Office of Economic Development, Louisville Forward. I'm sure you're all familiar with Scott and his work. Let me just start by saying we've been benefiting significantly as a community-based organization from the support of Metro Council for a while, so I do want to take a minute to acknowledge that work. In our presentation, I just kind of flipped through it because we've got a lot of slides here, and my point is not to really bore you with a slideshow. It's to really let you know how we want this presentation to impact the work. So there's three things that I hope to accomplish. One, just to raise the awareness within the Metro Council of what's happening in Russell, what's happening at LCCC, and how we're a major stakeholder working in support of the Vision Russell Choice Neighborhood Initiative that's being led by Metro and Housing Authority. But you all will be familiar with our site at 1300 Ali. Why don't you back up, Sean? Yeah, back up to one. Okay, next one. Our site is at 1300 West Ali, the old Walnut Street development. And a lot of the work that's happening there has been a catalyst to a lot of the economic development work that's happening in West Louisville. And we were inspired by Mayor Fisher's vision a number of years ago. I think it was 2012 when the mayor asked us to help create a vision for transformation in Louisville. And so we took that to heart, and we advanced the idea of activating or reactivating Muhammad Ali Boulevard. Now, in case you're not familiar with the history of Ali Boulevard, formerly known as Walnut Street in our community, was changed. The name was changed back in the 70s. Walnut Street served our community as a major commercial corridor that created a strong connection between the downtown business district and West Louisville up until its demise in the mid-60s as a result of some of the urban flight, followed up by urban renewal and a lot of demolition and more investment in low-income housing, which set forth a pattern of poverty, intergenerational poverty from that point on. So we, as a community-based nonprofit that serves families in Russell from birth to adulthood, we realized to really change the trends of that poverty tends to create in our communities, that we really had to really impact change in the community. So we started by changing our own selves. So when you come by our site, you'll find a $13 million capital investment right in the heart of Census Tract 30, which is the poorest census tract in this county. And it's there to be a beacon for what economic transformation could look like. But then we decided we wanted to go external to our organization, and we began to look at Ali Boulevard. So back in the summer of 2015, we commissioned the American Institute of Architects to come and study with us and dream with us. And they created a plan under their Sustainable Design Assessment Team project, a plan for how we as a community could reactivate Ali Boulevard. I'm going to leave this packet with you so you can have it for future reference, but over the 3-day charrette that we had, we engaged some 200 stakeholders in our community that represented a broad cross-section of Louisville, from the faith community to government to business owners to neighborhood people. And they all believe that we could do this, we could really reactivate Ali Boulevard. So this past year, actually ahead of that, we did get support from the city, and the mayor invested in our talent to really organize a plan. So I want to give you a highlight of that plan that we actually released to the community back in March of this year, a plan we refer to as the Boulevard. And this rendering that's on the screen now is kind of a broad overview of that. We're talking about a 1.5 mile corridor development that we envision to become a complete street makeover for Ali Boulevard, beginning at 5th Street in the business district, and then going westward as far as we can take it at least until 22nd Street. So the plan that we have developed with the support of Gresham Smith and Partners, a local landscape architectural firm that really worked with us to create this master plan, that includes a 1.5 mile that's broken up into 3 sub-districts. The first of which is inside the business district. It goes from 5th Street to 9th Street or Roy Wilkins, and we call that the Garden District. The Garden District gets its name because of Louisville Gardens right there that we know is in need of a new purpose and a new future, and we'll come back to that. But then the second leg of it is in the middle there. We call that the Walnut District. And we got these names because we had landmarks in these districts, and the old Walnut Street landmark gives us its name. But that's also the place where Beecher Terrace lies, right in those blocks between 9th Street and 15th Street. Actually, Beecher goes to 13th Street, and we're located right there at 13th and Ali as well. So we've been very fortunate to gain the support of the Metro Housing Authority's Board of Commissioners that have positioned us to work closer with their master developer, McCormick Barron Salazar, as they work to do the replacement of those 768 dwelling units at Beecher Terrace, and they're going to replace them with 620 units. And we have negotiated a place to be a part of that development for the purpose of bringing this arts and culture district to this community. And the core focus of that district is commercial real estate development. We want to do that, and I'll touch on why that's important in just a minute. But then the third leg of it is from 15th Street down to 22nd Street. We refer to that as the Heritage District, getting its name from the African American Heritage Center there on the corner of 18th and Ali. And that real estate, you can tell by the rendering there that there's a lot of difference in the character of these different sections of this corridor. In the Heritage District, most of that real estate is residential, with the exception of some commercial and several churches. And that's where we start in our redevelopment idea for that part of it, is to work with those churches that own real estate, several own real estate that touch Ali Boulevard that is either vacant or doesn't have a purpose. So we're working with 4 churches right now to help them to envision a new future for the land that they already own, the asset that they already have. So that's kind of an overview of the district. Now we're really here to talk about how the city and the Metro Council can support this project through the public right-of-way improvements that are necessary to make a complete street project work. And I just want to emphasize that because we are not here to seek support for some of the other development that's happening outside of the public right-of-way. So if you can see from this, rendering this up there, we're talking about a right-of-way that runs along Ali Boulevard that's about 64 feet wide from property line to property line. And currently, those conditions along Ali represent the fact that Ali is a one-way street going west, and it has two large center lanes, 12-foot wide center lanes, and there's parking lanes as well on both sides. And more recently, there have been some improvements to bring bike lanes to major sections of Ali Boulevard as well. So the existing conditions of that right-of-way speak to the fact that there's a lack of trees that align the boulevard on major sections. This particular one is actually, this particular photograph is actually taken right there near the Greyhound bus station, so there was some landscape improvement there, but for the lion's share of that 1.5 miles, there's not a tree planting. It has wide lanes. The vehicular lighting is in one direction. We have very wide crosswalks. So the next slide will show that there is a conversation within our plan that represents converting back to a two-way traffic pattern. And I would say that that idea didn't necessarily start with us. That's already been a part of the public discourse and discussions within city government, as well as within the Downtown Development Corporation, even ahead of us being engaged in this conversation. However, we totally agree with the idea of two-way traffic on Ali, and that would allow us to reduce the width of the traffic lanes, slow down the traffic along that way, make it more conducive for pedestrians, and there would be curb extensions and parking zones. We want to make sure that there's good amenities in that area. So the next slide there will show you just an existing condition photograph of what this garden district looks like. Right, this taken outside the existing Louisville Gardens, and you can see the design there. And the next slide really gives you a visual of just focusing in on the narrowing of the roadway, the widening of the pedestrian way, and again, those kinds of amenities that bring some attractions, landscaping, lighting, and so forth. There's a couple of more of these types of photographs, and these are just illustrations to give you an idea of the kind of vision that we're operating with the kind of redesign that our landscape architect firm has recommended that we should strive toward. So we'll just flip through the next few of those for the Garden District until we get to the Walnut District. And this particular photograph gives you with existing condition of the Walnut District is like, beginning there right across 9th Street. The same traffic pattern, one direction. There is a little bit of a narrowing of the roadway as you cross 9th Street. Not much, but it goes from a 64-foot right-of-way down to a 61-foot right-of-way. But other than that, the same design elements are there. And we'll just switch over, and you'll see again, working within that existing right-of-way, we envision two-way traffic and the same kinds of widening of sidewalks and amenities and landscaping and lighting and so forth. So, and then it's a similar illustration as we flip through the slides, Sean, until we get to I want to stop at these. There's a series of renderings here, because you all might recall that back when I showed the exploded view of the 1.5 miles, there was a section there that represented 4 blocks within the Beach Terrace footprint, and we're currently working with a development team. You know, you don't have to go back to that. I just wanted to reference that. I'm sure our council colleagues would remember that slide. But I really want to focus on the renderings of the building types and the kinds of development that we envision for those 4 blocks that go along Ali Boulevard. So these are conceptual renderings, but they illustrate the types of buildings, and these kinds of recommendations came directly from the American Institute of Architects study when they talked to us about creating a critical mass as you cross 9th Street of buildings, typically 4 to 5 stories, and all of which having commercial real estate development on the lower floors. So these renderings have been put together by a development group that's prepared to bring the capital with them to develop those 4 sub-blocks. And so this one here, we do show the need for a neighborhood market, so that concept is there, but the idea is to create a critical mass of commercial. Yes, sir.
If I may just interject,
Mr. Yates.
I just heard something that just made me smile as a positive. You said that the developer there, that they have the cash they may be putting up to go ahead and build in that area. They're interested in building that area because one thing, working with the Dixie redo for so long, obviously we worked to make sure the infrastructure was in place, but the worry and fear is always the developer. Will they follow? Will they develop when you're putting that into it? So if you have a developer who feels confident that if they build that they're going to be able to be filled with tenants to be paying, that's a huge success. That's
and right positive. Now, as we speak today, and we've had a commitment for them for well over a year, that we do have that commitment. But I emphasize the right now point because, as you know, in private industry, time is a premium in of itself, and we've been negotiating an issue around land control, and we haven't closed that gap yet. But we're getting close. Councilwoman Sexton Smith was with us last week at the Housing Authority's meeting when the commissioners approved the effort to negotiate, and I was on a conference line this morning with the master developer negotiating the land control, because it takes getting control of the land before we can actually get the commitment, the real commitment of the capital. But Mr. Yates, you're right.
Well, if you have a developer willing to put tens of millions of dollars into an area, that's a huge push for obviously the public. That's a huge win. So that's to me, right. That makes this committee all worthwhile. I'm all smiles because I know obviously we've been talking about this for a couple of years and the expansion but to hear that kind of commitment, that's tremendous news.
Thank you, sir. And the next few slides there just give you kind of the illustrations of how we envision those other subsequent blocks, those 3 blocks. And again, these are concepts, but they do speak to the kind of vision that we're operating with our investment partners, that they're really looking to not only bring capital, but also bring the planning, design, and build talent. In this network, we're working with a company by the name of McKissick & McKissick, which is a large engineering and architectural firm, and they've are really interested in the arts and culture space, having just completed the African American Heritage Museum in Washington, D.C., so they found a forte with arts and cultural kinds of developments, and they're very interested in this project. But again, we've got to get over the hurdle of having land control. So the next part of it is, and I'm going to speed it up, the Heritage District, same kinds of scenario, one-way traffic, yet a little bit of a narrower roadway. Now we're talking about a 59-foot right-of-way. And so it chokes down from 64 to 61 now to 59 feet as you get into these three sections. And again, the next slide will show that we have a plan to rebuild the public right-of-way infrastructure around the traffic flow, as well as the curb parking lots, the parking sites on both sides, the landscape and lighting and so forth. So the rest of it that's in this deck really just gives you more illustrations. One of the things I will highlight as we negotiate with the pastors, that the real estate that they own are typically the residential narrow lots kinds of real estate, but we want them to envision that for commercial purposes. So we've been very clear with them that our effort to empower them is not to grow the sanctuaries of the church or the ministry. It's really to grow economic development and commercial real estate, in which they all really buy into, because they have now seen that when you have an asset, in this case vacant land, it should be turned into a revenue generator for the good of the community as well as the church. The last thing I'll say is at the end of this slide deck, Gresham Smith and Partners prepared for us a cost estimate for the public right-of-way. You won't be able to read it from this screen, but it does break it down for each of the respective districts. And I'll just get to the bottom line of it. This is estimated at $12.5 million of public improvements. And the good news to that is there are efforts already directed towards some of this work because of the previous commitments that have been made by Metro through Louisville Forward for supporting the Beecher Terrace redevelopment with public infrastructure improvement. So that chunk of it has already been planned and committed through Community Development Block Grant. So the rest of it, we've got to figure out over the next 7 to 8 years of this kind of long-term development, how we make up the gap for building out this. But I wanted to just give you kind of the vision behind this project and what the hope is, one, that you would be more informed. Two, I would love for Metro Council to consider acknowledging our efforts with some kind of support, some kinds of demonstrated support. I'm talking in this case moral support for the work. It could be just an acknowledgement that this is something that the city needs to get behind and support, and the council stands with it. And then, of course, ultimately, and the third hope and aspiration for this is that you would begin to organize future commitments to public infrastructure improvements and make this particular project one of those priority projects that will really help to change the trends in West Louisville. In closing, I would just say that the vision behind our vision is really an economic transformation plan. And we are a part of a community that there is a tale of two cities. And on one side we see, especially in the business district, a lot of growth, a lot of improvement, a lot of investment. And because of that, there obviously is some future economic forecasting that suggests that this community is going to generate more revenue for itself by attracting more investments and more visitors, especially to the business district. We're trying to position the west side of downtown to be prepared to benefit from that. So ultimately, this is an economic development strategy that will help change the directions and the trends for how money flows through tourism and visitors that come to our community. Not exclusively, but it's certainly a major component, because we do know, because of the tale of two cities, that there is an economic disparity when you look at indicators like household income, and you compare 22 census tracts on the west side of downtown to 22 census tracts on the east side. There's a disparity. So because of that, that's why small businesses really struggle in West Louisville when they depend just on the immediate market of the residents that live in West Louisville, simply because the disposable income is not there. So that's why our plan is very intentional about accommodating visitors and creating attractions that help us to change the trend. So I'll stop with that, and hopefully you'll have a question.
I have a couple questions. This is a really nice presentation. Did you work with Louisville Forward on doing this, or planning and design when you were doing this?
Yes. Yes, we did, Ms. Butler. And I apologize, I didn't give kudos to where they belong to Louisville Forward. When we worked with the mayor and the mayor invested it through a contract, it was administered by Louisville Forward. And we worked very closely with Gina Dunlap up until just recently in shepherding that process. So the answer is yes, we have worked with Metro very closely.
Because what this appears to be to me is a quarter study, which could be part of our land use plan, and it should probably be introduced as an ordinance so that it can become part of the land use plan. So if anyone wants to do something along Muhammad Ali, the planning staff and the planning commission would refer to this to make sure that it's comprehensible, that they all melt together and they work together. And the other thing, I know when I was looking at this, you had some stuff that was mixed use and other stuff that was commercial and some residential. Do you know what the zoning is along that whole corridor?
It's mixed. In the swatch that is the business district is mostly commercial, nearly all commercial. As you get west of 9th Street, there's a mix of commercial and industrial, a lot of which of the residential, say commercial and residential, I said industrial, it should have been residential. A lot of the residential is public assisted housing. And in terms of zoning, I don't know exactly how that's characterized, maybe multifamily residential. But as you get further down, there's single-family residential with some commercial spots along the way.
Well, I would suggest that you get to whichever council member along that corridor is going to do the ordinance for you. I'd suggest that you get with planning and design before that and overlay this on top of zoning to make sure, because at the same time that we're doing this, we can also do a blanket rezoning by working with the residents. That way, if you have somebody ready to come in, they don't have to wait 6 to 8 months to get a zoning change. It's already done. At the same time, you want to work with the residents. We don't want to downzone someone. So you need to work with each of them and look at each individual property that abuts this to make sure that it's all kosher on there.
Thank you. That's great insight, so thank you. We weren't
welcome.
thinking along that line, so I really appreciate that.
Well, it'll cut a few months off your economic development.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Yates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's funny kind of going through this. It wasn't that long ago that we started kind of the vision and thought for Dixie Redo, the Dixie Highway, which is actually going to work its way down to help complement this. You know, this one city, we all kind of build off each other. And I know part of this is still early stages and envision, but you said that potential developer that you have in there, one thing I've learned is you cater to them now, bring them in there, make sure they're part of your group, make sure they're part of their team, because businesses, they invest where they're going to make a profit. They have to. They can't come in. Government, we have certain duties to make sure that the streets are right and there's walkability and it's safe and stuff, but that ultimately, when private businesses invest, they have to invest for profit. So they're going to have a major interest in these things coming in place so they have the opportunity to make that profit. And so when I looked at, I guess it was going into the Walnut where you had the coffee shops and everything on the bottom, it looked like it might be mixed use with residential on top of it.
Yes.
And so I guess my point would be that's going to be the hardest part of your entire plan, because you can make the streetscape, you can increase it, you can make the streets go whichever way you want to, but if the businesses don't come there and invest and they're not making that profit, then nothing else happens. Then you just have some pretty trees. But one thing I've learned, that if you build it, they come. And that's what we saw with Dixie Highway. In the event that the government's willing to invest in an area, if they're willing to clean up an area, beautify an area, then private investment will follow. And so I know Mr. Love knows we've been down that road before already. Get them at the table, listen to them, because I would be really headstrong with some of the things what I envisioned, what I wanted, and they say, well, that's fine and dandy, Mr. Yates, but in order for us to make a profit, we have to have X, Y, and Z. And I realized in order for them to invest, they have to be making a profit. So it looks like you guys you got a great vision. But if you already have somebody willing to put tens of millions of dollars into this thing, I wouldn't let them go.
Thank you, Mr. Yates, and thank you for reminding me that I failed to mention that for those 4 blocks, the development pro forma that our partners have organized is valued at $227 million. So it should cause all of us to pause, and we've been championing the kind of welcoming environment that this community, because this is a non-local entity, but the kind of welcoming environment to attract and make them feel comfortable is very important. We've been doing that from our vantage point as a small community nonprofit, but we've been also working with the larger systems here, local government, the housing authority, to get the same kind of spirit that we have to make sure that this is a win for our community. So I appreciate your point, and thank you for that. And would ask you that if you want to be a part of those kinds of welcome wagon approaches, we, as a council, we will welcome the help.
We're all in it together.
Yeah.
What benefits one area benefits the next. It's,
Yeah.
I always talk about it's like a car. In the event you can't go anywhere with a flat tire, you got to make sure that we're all moving together. And with the Dixie redo, sometimes they say, well, this end is getting this development, this end's getting this development. And I said, you're driving up and down Dixie Highway. You got to make sure it's right. And then, and obviously coming in, that corridor also will feed off of the next. So I think that it's kind of, all ships rise with the tide.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Barbara Sexton Smith.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Fields, thank you so much for being here this evening. And you've been working on this for, it seems to me, a few years. Is that right?
Absolutely. We began this back hard and heavy in 2013. We organized our capacities to get a visioning process going in 2012 in response to the mayor's call. But we really got going hard and heavy in 2013 when we did our first presentation of that vision. We began to network with the Housing Authority. I want the council to remember Louisville Magazine published an article in March of 2013 titled "Stop Ignoring the West End." Well, that work we were a catalyst for that because Dan Crutcher, the publisher of Louisville Magazine at the time, was our board chair, and he wanted to demonstrate through his magazine what needed to happen to really get the community, thinking real serious about these opportunities. And that particular publication, as well as the series of publications thereafter, have really helped to galvanize a major renaissance of economic development in West Louisville, because all of this predated the passport work. It predated even the food port project that didn't happen, but it was inspired by that work in part. A lot of projects have been inspired by that. So we've been at it. LCCC as an organization is now in its 70th year in Russell neighborhood. And for most of that time, we've squarely focused on our core mission of serving kids and families. But we just learned that when we were successful in helping families to achieve their goals of being economically stable, guess what happened? They moved out of the neighborhood. So if we wanted to really create a vibrant neighborhood, we had to change the conditions. So that same year of 2014, the following year, we convinced the Housing Authority to go after the choice neighborhood application that they won. So we've been at this, to your point, for a long time.
Right, and I just wanted to make sure that my colleagues knew that and understood it. So you might recall the Louisville Magazine did a series of 3 publications, beginning with The Tale of Two Cities. And the data showed that there was approximately $453 million of disposable income in the area that was studied for the first magazine article. And it also showed that in West Louisville neighborhoods, $217 million of disposable income is leaving West Louisville and going to other parts of the Jefferson County and throughout the region because of so much of the things that folks are spending that $217 million on, you cannot find and you cannot buy in West Louisville. So what we have before us now are a few folks who've been fighting the good fight for many, many years, the Louisville Central Community Center for 70 years, because right in the heart of the Ali Boulevard vision and dream is where, unfortunately, one of the best cases of one of the worst examples of redlining in the United States of America. And when you saw the Garden District and it showed the Mammoth Life building, it's now the River City Bank, that was originally the Mammoth Life building. And that was one of the few, if not the only, completely original structures that survived urban renewal. And if you've not seen the story of the history of redlining in Louisville, Kentucky, where then Mayor Charles Farnsley leads the guided tour, you should look at that, and he talks about that building being there. So for me, at the corner of 6th and Muhammad Ali, where that building sits, that's a divine intersection. And I know my fellow colleague, Councilman Benson, is constantly reminding us of the importance of the infrastructure and that you must have that. We heard an impassioned conversation at a previous committee meeting today about making sure that the infrastructure is in place. So I commend you for bringing that today and making that the focus, because, Mr. Fields, it's awful easy to get off on selling the dream of all the wonderful bells and whistles in the $200 million plus proposed development. So as we've heard in the last year and a half, here in the Russell neighborhood and going west of 9th Street, we keep hearing the number $1 billion of economic development is west of 9th Street. This is real, colleagues. It's coming. There are shovels in the ground, and there are more shovels coming in the ground. But what we need to have happen is for all of the Metro Council, and I've pledged my full 100% commitment and support to be a champion along with these folks, and to tell the story everywhere that we can, how critically important it is that folks in West Louisville have the opportunity and then take advantage to build by the people, for the people, with the people. This is so critical that folks such as yourselves are the ones who are leading the charge. Yes, an out-of-town developer will come in, but colleagues, I want to share with you, once we get far enough down the road and we start meeting the developers, you're going to find that some of them have Louisville connections. One of them has a Beecher Terrace connection. You talk about an amazing story where a young man can leave the Beecher Terrace and go off and ultimately do well and put partnerships together and meet with Kevin Fields and others and come back to Louisville. Why? I met with this man a year and a half ago at Sweet Peaches at 18th and Muhammad Ali to hear his vision. And he's real and he's ready. And Councilman Yates, to your point, if you have a developer who's interested and is bringing money, you need to strike when it's hot. However, to your credit, Mr. Fields, you've stayed patient whilst working with the Choice neighborhood. That's the $29.5 million HUD grant that our city was awarded. There were 5 cities that were awarded these in that 1 year, and we were very lucky and fortunate. We put together a great plan, and we have that coming our way, but now it's got to produce a couple of $100 million in wraparound mixed-use development. And what I want all of us to constantly watch for is who is really going to benefit. And it must be the folks in West Louisville. The folks in West Louisville must have an opportunity to partner with that developer, own that coffee shop, own part of and partner in the grocery retail, own the dry cleaners, own the restaurants, own and operate the entertainment venues, and yes, get to live above those facilities, as you've seen in the renderings all along here. So we have a chance before we are carried off by flights of angels as we begin to age on this Metro Council. In our lifetime, we are going to see complete, full economic transformation of West Louisville, and it begins with this kind of a vision that is far beyond a vision. It's reality. You've already put together great partners. So I commend you. I know that the Metro Council, I feel that I can speak. We'll be asking questions, and we'll be there supporting. And I look forward to working with you and folks in Louisville Forward and Scott Love on a proposed ordinance to do the suggestions that Councilwoman Butler suggested earlier in the meeting. So thank you so much for a job well done and a journey on which we are honored to travel with you.
Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate your leadership and support, and we know we can count on you, so thank you. Any other questions?
No one else is in the queue, so
Okay.
good luck with the future. And when you work with Louisville Forward, include planning and design, because you want to look at the zoning along there as well. That'll be a separate ordinance coming down the road, but you want to know what you've got.
And
Thank you.
utilities, your cost on that.
Yes. Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And colleagues, without objection, we are adjourned.